All right, guys, we have two guests for you today. First, the one and only Kate Grace. Kate, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we have Jake Tuber, an old friend and a teammate of mine from our track and field days at Connecticut College and the mastermind behind the new Endeavorun program. Jake, thanks for being here as well.
Oh, you got it, man. It's good to be joining you. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Jake.
All right, guys.
I like your headset.
What I wanted to do today was talk a little bit more about how a pro athlete like yourself, Kate, structures an entire season or maybe even an entire year of training. Because I think one of the big differences between how the pros and how the rest of us look at a season, and it's a really different kind of a mindset and an approach. And then Jake will talk a little bit more about Endeavorun and how, I don't even know what to call it. It's not a training program. It's not a coaching service. It's not a running camp. It's all of those things put together into one. And it's such a comprehensive type of program that we probably need a new category to describe it. So I want to talk about both of those things. And Kate, let's start with talking about your process. And maybe we can go into a little bit more detail about, some basics first. Let's start with those basics. When you think about how you're structuring a season, how long should it be? Let's start there.
It's interesting. So I'm kind of in the middle, in my off season right now, I would say. So that I have about 6 weeks of downtime after the track season. I definitely think every year I take stock of what I've done the past year. And I feel like it's kind of a normal thing. I mean, we're used to having kind of these annual reviews, right? Of looking at what worked, what didn't. So it's worked well for me to once a year have a bigger overview. What worked well last year, what I want to change for next year. For track, we definitely have these natural peaks in the summer where there's going to be a world championships or Olympics. So it's definitely an annual cycle. I guess technically if you're going to look at a long-term cycle, it's annual, but within that, we probably have two little peaks, like kind of one more in February and then one later in the summer. Because I'm trying to think about how it would relate to marathoners, right? Like maybe, I don't know, do marathoners usually have two big races throughout the year, or is it also just one?
Well, I think it kind of depends on the athlete, but I think the typical, more standard approach is a spring marathon and a fall marathon. And so your year is structured in a certain way to give you the best possible chance of having a peak performance on those two races. So yeah, it's a very similar approach where you have that final, goal race at the end of the season. And there's basically two seasons during the year. And of course, there's probably some recovery time, some off-season training in between those two.
Kate, I have a question for you. Sorry, Kate, question for you. Like, does your experience on the Bowerman Track Club as one of the shorter distance athletes, I mean, you're primarily focused on the half mile and the mile. Do you think that your experience there and your February and summer peaks are the same as that of your athletes who are on the team like Emily or Lopez or Mo who are focused on the 5 and 10K and longer distances? Like, do you feel like your experience in terms of peaking mimics theirs, or is there a noticeable difference even within your own team?
I think we're all trying to peak at similar times in terms of like having a peak in the summer, basically. So our main, for us, like our main races, you need to be fit enough to peak to like make a team at the U.S. championships. And then ideally you have like your main peak toward the end of the summer when like the world champs or Olympics are. And so I guess I say like, for me, it's almost too much to rethink my whole training twice a year. So in general, I have once a year where I deep dive into all aspects of training, like what went well, what do I want to improve, have my various lists of training and strength and PT, all the different kind of categories. What do I want to do for next year? And that generally happens annually. So right now, basically, it's like, okay, I'm starting my year. I have my goals. What other aspects am I going to try to add into my program? So in terms of, so yeah, that like revamp happens annually, but it kind of covers too many peaks in terms of the training, because I'm going to go through from now I'll build until like kind of a more slightly peaked phase in February, take a little downtime, and then build again to like August, right? But I do like, in a way, I also kind of like the idea that like within that, that having almost too many phases within the year allows me to then also tinker with my program, right? But yeah, I mean, I find it very helpful to start a year of training or to start a season with kind of just with objectively looking at what I've done in the past and what I want to have included in my program this year, and not just kind of willy-nilly start running, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a real strategic approach for your training, Kate. And so when you say, you peak in February and then you peak again in late summer, sometime in August, it sounds like there's basically 2 training cycles, or maybe we'll call them a mesocycle if we wanted to get super geeky with our training theory terms, of training. And then you mentioned a little bit of a break after your February peak. What might that little break look like?
It would be maybe a few more days. Maybe some people will never take days off running, and so they maybe take a few days. That's for them as a break. I generally would take a day off running every few weeks anyway. So maybe I'll take either like 2 or 3 days off running, or maybe just instead I'll have a week period in which I'm not doing any intensity, runs are shorter, maybe my mileage is dipped, just like a pretty much a recovery week. You don't want to fully come off of you don't want to get to the point where it's like impossible to get back working out. So I don't just stop running altogether, but it's kind of like mentally, physically having your body kind of reset, and then to then be able to start a little bit more of a base phase. So I'm trying to think, usually it's about 2 weeks of no interval workouts. I might, drop my mileage a little bit and then go back to normal mileage, but have it just be generally less intense, just to allow for that slight rejuvenation.
And then
mentally as well as physically. Sorry.
Oh, sure. I think the mental part is equally as important as the physical part, especially when you're competing at a really high level. Now, does the recovery period after your August peak, does that look any different than what that recovery period looks like at the end of February?
Yes. It's like much more like it's kind of taking a full step back. And again, not just with the track season, it makes sense that it's the August period is the real, like where you really want to be at your best. So that's kind of where the full break comes after that. I generally take a good amount of time off running. Different people have different things, again, that work for them. Some people don't actually like to take that many days off in a row because then they end up getting injured coming back. But even if maybe maybe some people will run every other day, but just 30 minutes. So they're just keeping their tendons kind of used to the active running, but they're not doing, they're basically at no mileage, just kind of going out for light jogs. And I'll take a full 2 weeks of that, if not a tiny bit more. And then from there, slowly build up mileage. Slowly build up mileage for a few weeks, slowly build up intensity, and I will be off workouts for 6 weeks.
Wow. Yeah. I love this high level look at how you're structuring everything, because it's so well thought out and strategic. And I think that's a big difference between how people like me structure their running now and professionals like yourself. Now, you kind of mentioned this.
What do you normally do?
Well, now I'm not training and competing at my best because I'm more competing for being a dad to 3 kids, which is also I think a professional level sport. But back when I was training a lot, it was very similar. I kind of modeled my post-collegiate training after very similarly what we did in college. And in college, it was more of a bigger break after the outdoor track season in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd get, I might take like 2 weeks off of running in late May or early June. And then there's the summer base building season before cross country. You take a short break after cross country sometime in November usually. And then the indoor and outdoor track seasons are roughly combined. There's a little bit of a break in between. But there's really no base phase before the outdoor track season. And, this is my experience at Connecticut College, which is a Division III school. And I know things work a little bit differently in Division I in terms of scheduling. And one thing I want to note too, is for our listeners, the timing of what Kate is talking about isn't really the important part. You don't have to peak in February and August. You don't have to structure your recovery time, after those peaks. It's more the principle of, setting up formal time to rest and recover after a hard running season. And I think that's really important for, like you said, Kate, both your physical recovery and your mental recovery. Now, you probably race more often than just your goal race at the end of these 2 mini seasons. How do you figure out how many races to put into a single training cycle? And, how do you space them apart? How do you think about all that?
This is still evolving. And I think it probably changes throughout your time, right? But one of the things to think is, what is the purpose of the race? So sometimes the purpose of the race can literally be to practice racing, right? I mean, at one point it's worthwhile to practice the different tactics, or going through what it means to like how you prepare for a race, so not get nervous. Yeah, I mean, I think, especially when you're younger or you're newer to the sport, just having time racing is going to improve your racing. Racing is a skill like any other, right? And you can work at it. That said, other times there are different goals to races. Like racing, you can race for trying to get into shape, almost like a hard workout effort, but it's just not better to have it with somebody else, right? Or you can race for a fast time, whereas maybe your peak, for us at least, our peak races aren't necessarily going to be the fastest times. Again, this is different for different people, but sometimes peak races, if it's more championship style, you might be running a slow race. So if you want a PR, you might do that earlier. In terms of the timing of races, again, this is for shorter distance. For a while, once I was in my season, I liked having a 2-week cycle. So every 2 weeks, have a little bit of a race. It almost would function as a workout at that point, right? But a race just within the season has its own like special place. It's its own kind of special type of workout. Again, I think as Jake was saying, with different people, even on my team, like if you're a 10K runner, and you're not going to run a 10K multiple times throughout the season. But I do think that there is also value in, if you have your peak race, like, or your key race, like if I'm going to run a 1500, it's for me sometimes also helpful to run a 3K at the beginning of the season, because it's twice the distance, but it's helpful to get that aerobic stimulus, or conversely to run something under distance to get that speed. And I think people don't always realize that racing different distances can have great benefits, even more so than racing your own distance more than once.
I think that's often a surprising thing for a lot of runners to hear, because I'm very much in contact with runners who have certain goals in, say, longer races, maybe the half marathon or the marathon, and they only focus on that one race distance, constantly.
Yeah.
So they're the 2 or 3 marathons a year because they're trying to get that Boston qualifier, and it's just marathon training, then the marathon over and over and over again. But I think, like you said, racing is a skill. And if you get faster in the 5K, then that means that you're improving your fitness, and that carries over really well to other race distances. I did want to ask you, and you touched on this a little bit, about how different race distances kind of play into your decision-making process, because, like you said, you're not going to race a 10K, 10 times during a season because it's just too stressful.
Right.
Same thing as if you're a marathoner, you're not going to have 3 tune-up marathons before your goal marathon. How do you figure out how many races you want to run as a middle distance runner, focusing on the 800 and the 1500 versus someone who might be focusing on the 10K or even longer, maybe a half marathon or marathon road race?
Yeah, I mean, usually I think the different things to keep in mind are how much of a block of training do you want before racing? So right now, for us, it will be at altitude. So you want maybe a good, I don't know, 8-week block before you even start racing. So it's kind of, you take your whatever peak race and then work back from that. Want to get a certain amount of training before any racing happens, just so that training can be as like focused and great as possible without having to kind of take the downtime that racing requires. Then I'm not sure if I'm going to answer this question great, but basically then I would look also at, okay, maybe early on I'll race. So let's say if I want to race the 1500 at USA's, I'll want to race a 1500 maybe a month out from that to get the experience of racing it, to kind of get a fast time, to kind of get that stimulus. But maybe as I get closer to the event, my like race before the key event is going to be a shorter race, because it's not really meant, I don't need to like mimic the race itself. I know I'm ready for that, but I want the experience of racing, first of all, getting through the nerves, etc. And I want a little bit of that speed stimulus. So maybe I'll race an 800 2 weeks out as a way to get that speed stimulus, to make sure you're continuing to be race ready. But you also don't have like the extra nerves of having the same rate, of having to compare that race to what you're about to do, right? So like as I get closer to a key race, I actually would rather not race that distance. I'd rather race above or below that distance, and just so I don't have to, overthink what any of the times mean, if that makes sense. So like if you're getting up, maybe if you're going up to running a half marathon, maybe you just run a 10-miler on the road or a 5K on the road. So it doesn't matter at all. It's not going to mess with your mind in terms of what time you get, but you continue to feel like get that race stimulus. Does that make sense?
that's a really interesting way of thinking about the tune-up race as racing a different distance, because you don't want to race your primary distance, because if it doesn't happen to go well, that is a serious, chink in your mental armor. And, it could throw you off psychologically before you line up on the starting line for your goal race. I think that's a good way to think about it. And I really like how you do typically race a shorter race before your goal race, because that speed stimulus. And I know Jake and I did very similar things when we were in college. Coaches were always varying the race distances and, throwing the distance guys in the 4x400 to watch us flail around and suffer, because we're just not used to anything like that. It was always funny for the sprinters to watch the distance guys run a 400, right?
We did enjoy that quite a bit. Actually, I think that there's several 4x4s that would have come close to the national record if we hadn't included you at the anchor leg, Jason. So we'll talk about that another time.
Oh, was my 57 point not fast enough?
It probably wasn't much slower than myself at the time. Anyway.
Now, Kate, we got a question in from the health editor of Lifehacker about how the training is periodized. And she brought up a really interesting point of just asking about, how much time do you spend doing different types of training? So, you have your more aerobic oriented training, tempo runs, workouts like that. And then you obviously have your really short, fast repetitions where you're running, 1500 race pace or faster. How much time do you spend doing different things? And, do you subscribe to linear periodization, non-linear periodization? Can you talk more about that too?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think, I don't even know linear versus non-linear periodization, what those two things mean. I could guess, but I mean, in terms of general, like there's a base phase in the fall. It's about 2 or 3 months of more kind of aerobic type work. That said, most of I mean, since I've been training professionally, I mean, a lot of what we do, you kind of intersperse, you intersperse different types of workouts throughout. So it's not like you're never not touching speed, or you're ever completely going away from the aerobic system. You just slowly change the amount of time that is given to each of them, if that makes sense. So I'll be doing tempos up until a few weeks before my final race. It's not like I'm ever fully leaving that system behind, but in the fall, there's maybe 3 months of time in which that's more of the main focus, and speed is a little bit like we touch it, but it's not the main focus.
I think what you're describing is nonlinear periodization.
That's what I was thinking. I was going to guess, and that's what it was. But again, and I wonder, so this is, again, that's the part that I leave almost solely up to my coach. It's interesting in terms of the type of stuff that I have say on versus Jerry does. And it's mostly him. I haven't even, I'd be curious to Everett. I'm sure he would never jump on a podcast because he doesn't do that kind of stuff, but where his philosophy came from. But yeah, I mean, it seems as though that we have a base phase, then we have a phase in which we're kind of doing all different things. We actually go into a 12-day cycle, which is interesting, but basically we have a strength day, so an aerobic day, we have a specific day, so that's like where we hit our specific event group. So it's kind of probably more of a VO2 max day. Is that where, what would that be? Like we're basically, I'm like running more things that are geared right toward a mile, or a 3K. And then we have a speed day, in which we're just fully hitting just pure speed. And those are once every 3 days. And then we have a long run. And so the whole thing takes 12 days, and then you start over again. And it's interesting. I've never done that before, but because it's annoying because you're never on a week schedule. Like your long run can be on a Wednesday, but it allows you to get like one of each system as kind of your key workout. And then you have two rest days, and then you have the next workout. And that's kind of what we do January through February. And then we have like a smaller base phase again, starting in March for about a month. It's back to more of the aerobic stuff. And then you get back. And then as you get closer to races, you're still doing aerobic stuff, but yeah, you're doing maybe a month or two where you're more focusing on those specific workouts.
This sounds
meaning like specific to your event.
Right. Yeah. This sounds definitely like nonlinear periodization, where, you're not linearly progressing from aerobic work to strength-based work to speed work. You're really kind of interspersing all of the different types of workouts throughout the training cycle, but there's a certain focus at a certain given time. So you're moving through things in a more strategic fashion rather than kind of just doing a bunch of random workouts. It's the emphasis that I think is really critical. Now, Kate, you mentioned briefly your coach, and I wanted to talk more about this because I think this is a huge, big, important way that pros structure their season, is that you're not planning all this by yourself, are you? Assume you have, your coach, Jerry, and a whole other team of support people who help you with your training and everything else. What is your support network, and where do you get that support?
Different people do it different ways. I mean, my coach, Jerry is the one who is foremost, like he's the one who is planning the season. So it's actually, sometimes when I talk about my training in terms of, and my racing, I mean, he's very much as much or more than me making those decisions. And I think, as an athlete, I love the ability to have a coach that I totally trust, that I can just like kind of defer on certain things. And I think especially when you have hard workouts, it's so nice to have somebody that you just do what they say, and you trust that they know that they're going to get you in the right place. I think especially when you turn your brain off in these workouts, and you have to just like believe that you can do it, even if it looks hard. I went through a period where I was questioning everything. And when you question everything to a certain extent, then it's like I found myself rewriting workouts or not finishing workouts because I was in my mind too much, versus like just letting him do it and flowing with what I'm told to do, if that makes sense. But yeah, in terms of, then there's a full other like cohort of people that I work with to help all the other parts of what it takes to be kind of at my best. So that would be strength, physical therapy, massage, my like sports psychologist, and I have an agent. That's not necessarily on my training, but kind of with races, I guess. Yeah, and those people are people that I'm, at this point in my career, I'm mostly the one that's like the center that is dealing with all of them, and making sure that are kind of taking in the various information and having a full program that I trust will be the best thing for me. That said, I think especially when I was starting out, it was incredibly helpful to have a coach who I could trust, or have a coaching system that I could trust to kind of oversee all those elements. Because at one point, one of the biggest things I think with athletes or with runners is you start to get all this information and you almost don't know what to do with it because there's so many different things coming at you. Yeah, so I think, especially with younger runners, it's very helpful with people who are newer to the sport or want to make that next step. Having someone who helps you kind of distill all the different things that come toward you is an incredible resource.
Yeah, I can just speak from experience that when you're new to the sport, or your training age is relatively low, you've only been doing it for a couple of years, the ability to have someone who knows what they're talking about to help you structure things and plan things, and just to bounce ideas off of, to get confidence from, to talk you off the ledge when you've had a bad workout or race and you think all is lost, is such an enormous benefit, and something that I think would really help any newer runner, get them started on the right foot. And do you think, could you compete at this level and be at your level, Kate, without that level of support? If you just had to take out, the strength coach or the sports psychologist, I mean, how would that impact you?
No, I mean, at this point, I think it's made such a difference in the last few years of me being able to stay consistent, to stay competing at a high level, to, I think for a few years when I first started running, I was extremely inconsistent. And again, it's always hard to after the fact, find reasons why something was going on. But part of it, I think, was I just was kind of drowning and not knowing what, and not having systems in place and not having kind of this kind of structure. And I've thankfully been able to, be healthy, consistently train, slowly add different things into my program. And I think, part of that is having people to look toward that have helped me gain a structure to my training and have it be more than just showing up for workouts twice a week.
One of the hardest things for me as a coach is talking to, the adult recreational runner like I am now, and trying to convince them that getting that kind of support is only going to help their running. Because I think a lot of these runners, look at a pro runner and they say, well, they're a pro runner, so they have all that support. When that's kind of backwards. It's really, they are a pro runner because they have that kind of support. And of course, your hard work and your talent certainly plays the biggest role in all of that. But, it's, the final couple puzzle pieces that make it finished and, give you that extra edge that I think is really important.
Jason, I want to jump in if I can, because
absolutely.
I think that what Kate is getting at is so important for runners of different levels. And it's an area where, in my work as an executive coach, I often see and point to athletics as an area that is pretty much ahead of the curve relative to anywhere else, which is that you can benefit from coaching if you're a complete novice. You also see folks like Kate who are the best in the world that rely heavily on their coaches. And I think it's, somebody once mentioned this idea that, there's no one out there in the world that can really teach Tiger Woods anything about golf that he doesn't know, but he's got a litany of strength coaches, swing coaches, putting coaches, sports psychs, because sometimes it's just at that level about having a different vantage point that allows you to see something you can't see. At a more introductory level, you need someone who can be a little bit more directive, help you plan out and appropriately periodize whether it's linear or nonlinear training session. And so one of the things that I think about in coaching athletes that I borrow in coaching executives or doing leadership development work is trying to apply what's called the situational leadership model to thinking about coaching, meaning that my approach to coaching an athlete, or the way I think a coach should work with an athlete, is as much based on not only my expertise and needs, I shouldn't say my needs, my expertise and their needs in terms of, immediate feedback, but where they are in the journey in terms of how advanced they are. And I think, Kate, what you just illustrated is a beautiful illustration of how, when there's someone who is new to the sport or doesn't have a lot of knowledge and they have a lot of information thrown at them, it's probably a little bit more useful for a coach to be more directive. You want that coach to say, let me help you cut through the noise. Here's how this typically works. Here's how we may change things a little bit for you, but this is what you should focus on. Throw out this other 20%. Don't worry about focusing on every supplement. Just get in your miles, all that good stuff. And then as they get a little bit more advanced, that can take on a little bit less directiveness and a little bit more, I don't want to say passiveness, but allowing the athlete to do a little bit more of the leading. So you still have what would be called a holding environment for that athlete where they feel cushioned and supported, but you're kind of letting go of the reins over and over. And then eventually you get to a point where, and it sounds like, Kate, you're in many ways kind of at this point in your career, the athlete has had enough experience looking at not only everything that's out there, but what works for them and what doesn't, and can kind of drive the plan themselves. And that role of coach is really one of a true supporter, or one who's just there at a distance as perhaps an expert advisor around subtleties in learning. But ultimately, it's the athlete's job to be more self-directive and the coach's job to be more delegative or supportive in terms of the way they interact. So I think it's really important for amateur athletes as well as pros to recognize that coaching and that structure that's provided is valuable at any point in the lifespan of any athlete at any level. And it's really up to the athlete and their coach to figure out a mechanism for interaction that incorporates both what the athlete needs and doesn't need, as well as where they are in their professional journey. So the same approach that Kate worked for you years ago is not going to be the same approach that you need today. And being able to adjust as a coach as you see your athlete progressing and be ultimately just an enabler of their development and changing your own posture to do so is, I think, a core feature. And I think a lot of times we see coaches who get stuck thinking like, this is the way I coach. And that might work for certain athletes at certain times. And if that's generally based on good principles and you're really smart, it's going to work for a greater breadth of athletes at more times. But the real nuance to coaching and being sort of in tune with your athlete is making sure that you have the skill set and really the self-assuredness as a coach to adjust your style as the athlete grows in support of them.
Such a good point. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I definitely, and I think you're right. And again, it's funny that even now where I feel so confident and I have in many ways transitioned to feeling more like I am also kind of I'm an equal footing with certain coaches, telling them what I need. It's still to the point where it's so helpful just to have like Jerry just tell me what to do. But you're right. Like I have needed very different things throughout, very different types of engagement from a coach throughout my development. And 100% would not have been able to kind of make a jump without a much more, without having someone kind of help me, walk me through a program and tell me exactly like what to focus on, what to leave out. And yeah, I mean, like I said, that's what it's incredible. If anything, it's like my issue with trying to figure out what to do next in my life is that I have used coaches so much, and it's been incredible to have different types of coaches. And I get nervous thinking, what am I going to do when I don't have this like cohort of coaches to help me through? But for now, it's great. And I feel like everyone else should definitely, make use of different people and different experts.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jake, hearing you talk about taking some of these principles into the executive space and having, business leaders get coaching for their jobs. Because even with my experience on the business side of strength running, I've certainly hired people to help me think differently about certain things. And while at the very beginning, it was, tell me how to do X, Y, Z. And it was very prescriptive. Now that, strength running has been around for a while, I love just, reaching out for advice on really high level types of issues and just getting different perspectives on things. Cause I think that, at different stages of your professional career, that's really valuable. And the same is true as a runner. You're going to need different things when you're 1 or 2 years in than, when you're 8 and 10 years in. So this is all like so great. I'm just the track nerd in me is just geeking out on all of this nerdery here. So Kate, with all that we've just talked about, how do you think an amateur runner could listen to this and say, okay, I want to plan a season or my running, from a longer term perspective, more like an elite runner? Now, of course, they're not going to plan on running at USA's, and we're not going to, plan for 100 miles a week, most likely. But, what are some of the big picture principles that you think an amateur runner could take from this conversation and incorporate into their own training to influence how we structure our running?
It's one of the things I like to think about is, like in a race, when you want to kind of the idea of negative splitting a race or negative split, or basically not going out too hard, like not like blowing your load in the first whatever mile. I like to think of it as negative splitting a year or negative splitting a season, which is to say, I want to start out with a great base and just feeling like I can have this system that works well for me. And even if it's kind of keeping everything in the box, with the goal that as things get rolling and when you're toward your peak, that's like, you don't have to have crazy, incredible workouts or anything that's really showy early on. You want the showy stuff to come later. You just want to be able to do the work. So yeah, I mean, basically I tell myself that sometimes if I get nervous or I think that my workouts or whatever I'm doing isn't exciting enough early, is that, okay, no, I'm looking to negative split this. I'm looking to have my big exciting things are going to happen late. All I need to do right now is stay in the race. All I need to do right now is just like do my system. And I guess that's the biggest thing, is having a system, right? Like I have a very set system that I work with throughout the year. And it's not just running. It's also, how am I going to make sure I get enough sleep? What am I going to eat? Again, like not eating every day, but I literally go through and look at like, what are the 10 things I want to eat every day? Most days, right? Like to keep my anti-inflammatory stuff, or to make sure I'm getting protein, or make sure I'm getting good carbs. What is my strength routine going to be? I look at, like, when I start a season, I'm looking at what is this all going to look like, and how are my systems going to keep me through to the end? And I think sometimes people just start a season with the race in mind and don't have, and again, it's great. It's fine to just like go toward a race and race well, but having a plan in place for which how those other components are going to factor in is only going to help. And not a plan, again, that's going to make you, this is where the negative split comes in. You don't want to like do something you're going to be able to do for 2 weeks and then stop. You want to plan also of like who your supporter is going to be to keep you on track, so that you actually are able to stay consistent and do it 80 or 90% of the time. And I guess that would all come back to like also having at least a coach, or if possible, like a team of coaches to give you that structure or to help you create that system. It sounds like a lot of work, but it's kind of, I don't know, for me it's fun because I get to nerd out on it and see what types of things I think will optimize me. And especially if you're early on and you have someone else that you can lean on, they're doing a lot of that high level thinking, and you just have to kind of listen and turn your brain off, right?
Yeah, Kate, I actually want to give you a little pushback on you saying it's more work. I think it's a little bit more upfront work, but you talked a lot about systems, and you want a system for your strength to make sure you get enough sleep, for your food, for your training. And I think once you set up those systems, you're obviously not on autopilot, but it becomes so much easier after that to adhere to the training, to adhere to the sleep schedule and the nutrition guidelines, and to have, those dedicated strength days where you're, working on some of your weaknesses and getting stronger. Without the systems in place, it becomes a lot harder, because then you have to almost plan out practically every day and rely on your willpower. And that, I think, is one of the big differentiators between how a pro structures their training and how an amateur runner structures their approach to training, is that they don't have as many systems in place. And a new system that I'm excited to talk about today. How do you guys like that transition?
Oh my God, that was the best segue I've ever heard. That was incredible. Your segue machine.
Incredible. But I do want to talk about Endeavorun, because like I said at the beginning, it is not something that I can easily define, but that makes it so much more exciting. And, it's a coaching program. It's training, it's nutrition and strength. It's so different. And I know I've briefly talked about this on social media, but I do want to go into a little bit more detail on it. Jake, thanks for being here. Can you tell us about how you initially had the idea for Endeavorun and kind of how it started?
Sure. Yeah. And I should say that the fact that it's not incredibly easy to describe concretely, maybe just a huge marketing flaw on our end, Jason, more than anything else. So that's fair. But the initial story about this actually took place a few years ago. I was working with a coach that many of you will know. It's Jason's brother from another mother and father, Matt Fitzgerald. And Matt actually was helping me with a pro bono charity running project that I was doing, but had to delay it because he was spending the summer at that time living in Flagstaff alongside the Hoka Northern Arizona elite long distance running team there, training with Coach Ben Rosario and a handful of runners that many folks who listen to the show will be well aware of. And I remember working with him following that and just talking to him about how much he learned and how much he improved. And following that summer at age 46, he went and had a lifetime personal best in the marathon of 2:39, which was apparently, I don't know if this is true, Jason, was like several seconds faster than your personal best. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's the word on the street.
I am incensed that you've brought this up, Jake. But yeah, at age 46, Matt Fitzgerald beat my PR by a handful of seconds. I've run 2:39:32, and he probably, I think it was 2:39:25, or an amount of time that just makes me still stay up at night.
Well, just think about how much faster you're going to be at age 46 now that you know what we know, Jason. I mean, you're a ripe age of 24 years old, and by the time you get to be 46, you're going to be flying. So just think about it as a PR for you yet to come. But to the story as it goes, I was amazed that Matt was able to have a breakthrough. And this is somebody that is sort of trained at a high level, knows as much about the sport as anyone else. So this idea that something about being immersed in this pro experience was categorically different for him. And as an amateur who was starting to take running seriously again after a long hiatus myself, I was really curious about what it was that was so unique about that. Was it just that they had some amazing training plan? Was it purely that Flagstaff is at altitude? Was it, did they have just some special sort of nutritionists, or like what were they doing? Like how, in typical 2019 fashion, I was like, what's the one hack I can find as an amateur to do what they're doing? And in conversations with Matt, and then subsequently in conversations with a few pro runners that I happen to know, like Kate and others much later, it became clear that what the difference was not just any one facet or a couple of facets, but a thoughtful integration of a comprehensive approach that looked at exactly what Kate's talked about on this podcast. This idea of, I plan out my season. I have a couple of races in mind. I think about races beforehand that'll tune me up speed-wise and aerobically. I think about building my base, but I also have nutritionists that we can work with from time to time to get advice. We've got strength training. We've got sports psychology. And the fact that in Kate's case, she's the central person doing it at this point is not a surprise because of what a veteran she is in her career. For folks that aren't Olympians like Kate, you may need someone or some program to come along and design that. And so it was working with Matt and then talking to old friends such as yourself and Kate and others that we wanted to try to come up with something new in the marketplace. This idea of Endeavorun took flight, which is, I would basically try to describe it as a start to finish comprehensive training program. So it tries to take as much of the things that an elite group like the Bowerman group that Kate's a part of, or the Nas elite group that Matt trained with, or others, and combine that into a little bit more of a scalable way for folks. Because, you know, most people or anybody can't just move to Flagstaff for 8 weeks to train with a pro team. So how do we build in as much of that around our busy lives as adults as possible? And so it's a start to finish program, meaning that we take some of those core elements, like, you know, Kate's team goes on training trips and things like that. Kate, I know you guys, there's been talk about Bowerman going to Australia a little bit this winter. So you'll have to tell us if that's actually going to happen. But we decided, well, what can we do to kick things off for
Australia.
No Australia. Well, you heard it here first, folks. Breaking news, exclusive StrengthRunning Podcast. No Bowerman to Australia group. Let the Let's Run message boards light up with that. We decided to sort of build a program that had a kickoff, and we wanted to take folks to the mecca of running in the U.S., which is the University of Oregon in Eugene. And so starting this summer in July, that's when the program formally kicks off. The teammates who are part of the team are going to go to a 5-day retreat in Oregon, where they're going to get customized training plans that are going to take them from that retreat in July through the next couple of months, and ultimately culminate in a sort of a pro-style VIP race experience where they can train for anything from the 5K all the way up to the marathon at the Rock and Roll event in Las Vegas, which is an awesome event that's in mid-November. And they shut down the strip and you run at night, and the temperatures in November for night racing are basically perfect for those distances. And in between that, we've got a lot of virtual things like conversations just like this with athletes like Kate and other pros and coaches on the team. We've got some sports psych work that's coming in. We're going to do a yoga series. We're going to give folks access to one of my favorite video series on the web, which is, Jason, is your high performance lifting product, which I think is as good as anything that you can find for a pro or amateur out there online, and basically try to strategically combine and compile all those elements for an amateur in a start to finish program or experience, however you want to call it, so that those of us who put in as much time as we do in training can try to simulate, emulate, what have you, the elements of a pro season. Because I can't tell you the amount of folks who, to your point, this idea of having a plan and having a system, even if it's a little bit more work up front, is so critical to the outcome. I mean, I know so many folks there that have this goal of, I'm going to run Boston, or I'm going to, break this time in Chicago or something along those lines. And they maybe have a training plan that they execute, but it's one piece of the puzzle. And I often like to say that a goal without a plan is a wish. And I think a lot of folks put a lot of time and miles and money spent on getting to these big goals, and they're really scratching the surface of what they should be doing to optimize. I mean, if you looked at the amount of energy psychologically and physically that folks put into training for a major marathon, the fact that they're leaving so many of these different levers not pulled the way folks like Kate and others would, to me just seems like it's kind of undermining themselves if they're not actually going for it. So by combining all of these things into a start to finish program, we could do it in a really cool way. And because they're combined, we can do it at great value. Obviously, something like this is not going to be, 3 easy payments of $14.95, but we're able to do it in a way that's much more beneficial for folks putting the whole thing together start to finish. And I should say that we're thinking about decoupling some of the components. We've been pretty stubborn. I've been pretty stubborn about not wanting folks to, just piecemeal or a la carte the experience, because I think the proof is really in the pudding of the comprehensiveness. But there's been so much demand for things like just getting to go to the retreat where, Jason, I know you're going to be at, and Kate's going to be competing in Tokyo at the Olympics at that time. But, we'll have some other pros that finish behind Kate who maybe will join us at the retreat and things like that. So there's a lot of cool components to that. So that is a very long answer to a very short question, Jason. You like how I managed to do that? I said I was going to give you a nice, succinct answer, and that's what I gave you.
That was beautiful, Jake. You talked about the timeline. So it's July 2020 through November 2020. That's kind of the official kickoff through goal race season. Man, if I had something like this back when I was running more, this is exactly what I would have wanted. And not just because of the training, not just because of all of the systems that will be put in place, which really gets me excited as a coach, because I want runners to be more strategic with their training, not just their workouts or long run progression, but I want them to be strategic about getting help when they need it, and, investing some time and effort into their nutrition and strength training and sports psychology issues. You called them levers, Jake. And, as, when I think about levers, we talk a lot about this in the business world, different levers you can pull in your marketing, in your sales process, in your product development. And I love the crossover between athletics and business. And I think if anyone wants to really see their full potential and get as much out of themselves as a runner, they have to really focus on those levers. And, one of the things that I see all the time with runners is that they're ignoring a bunch of different levers. And over the years, I've tried to, focus on different levers to give runners this new perspective on, hey, there's this whole other thing that I can focus on that will help me improve. And I really love what you've done. When you told me about it, and, this is, I don't think a failure in your marketing when I say like it's hard to describe. I think it's more a failure in my vocabulary. It really is like a pro experience for the recreational runner, but I would maybe even go beyond that, because the cool thing about it is that, yeah, you're almost going to be treated like a pro runner, but you're also going to be treated as a fan of the sport of running. You get to go to a retreat at the University of Oregon. Maybe we'll get a private tour of the new Hayward Field, and we get to hang out with pro runners that we follow along with the sport, and, we can ask our questions to them. That is something you just don't get in other sports. It's something like, if you're a basketball fan, you're never going to go hang out with LeBron James or Steph Curry. Sorry, it's just not going to happen. But when running, there are these new opportunities. And I just think that's so cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jason, because I think that there's cool elements of the pro experience. And Kate, you touched on one or two of them earlier that I'll tee up here that we've also been able to weave in. So because this is sort of like a pro experience for amateurs, Kate talked about how she runs different races of different distances, even if there's one World Championships or Olympics race. So while this program is ultimately geared towards this awesome like VIP race finale experience in Las Vegas, the fact is that we can customize an individual. So everybody's going to get a customized training plan that someone like yourself, Jason, or Matt, or other true expert coaches are going to build based on each person's goals, based on their schedules, based on their history and abilities. And that can still account for somebody who wants to run Chicago or had really had their mindset on doing Berlin, and then also wants to maybe, take Berlin and, because 6 weeks later is Vegas, they can still have that half marathon and be somewhere within an extended peak of a season. So we can customize it the way Kate was talking about her training being ultimately something where even if there's one or two specific goals, with the right degree of expertise and precision, you can have an elite coach do that. And there's some other cool elements as well. So, we all see some of the swag and awesome gear that pros get. Like one of the things we've been able to do by putting together a program like this is give out all sorts of cool gear and discounts on shoes. So people who go through the program, just like the pros do, are going to get up to 25% off and free shipping on any shoes that they want or gear or things like that. We've got sponsors right off the bat from the minute folks sign up that can help them get discounts on stuff. So we're able to try to simulate the fun elements of an elite experience that come with the precision in training, the community of other like-minded folks who are going on that journey. And then really importantly to me, I think the last thing that I'll mention here in a plug is the accountability piece. That accountability, it's not just like someone hands you a training plan that's customized and says, okay, good luck. And if you have any questions, that'll be another, $59.99 for a half hour text conversation. There's a series of follow-up mechanisms that we've put in place that help someone execute their plan between July and November, such as team captain check-ins and calls like this and mandatory reviews in order to get access to some premium gear and things like that to make sure folks are going through their training. So I'm hoping that for, 120 or so folks that want to go through this experience start to finish and really take their running to the next level and kind of simulate a pro experience as best as, an amateur with a real life can, that something like this can really do that. And I'm excited because we've got just an awesome cadre of coaches like yourself and nutritionists and strength experts and pro runners that are part of this online community that are going to be going through it. So I'm really excited, and I'm just I'm thrilled that so many folks have looked at it and said, this is really cool. I want to be a part of it on the development side, and even more excited and encouraged and just thrilled to do everything I can to make sure to deliver the value for folks, because I know, as someone who's an injured runner right now, I know how awesome it is to be able to get out there and take it seriously and kind of put the pedal to the metal. So, as someone who's, constantly recognizing that I'm getting older and that window for peak performance, wherever my age is at, is kind of always diminished at this point. I really want to try to give it a go. And so I'm excited to go through the program itself. And I'm hopeful that I can convince Kate to pace me through a full marathon after she wins an Olympic gold medal just a few months earlier.
No
that
pressure,
is
Kate.
a separate conversation.
We'll talk about that offline. That sounds reasonable.
Well, I think my audience knows that I very rarely partnered with other companies on different joint projects and things like that. And so when I was approached by you about Endeavorun, it was something that I initially was like, well, let me see, I'll take a look. And I was pretty much blown away by what you've put together, the resources that you have compiled for the average runner, and also the team of pro runners and coaches that are going to be there to support them along the way. And so it was something that I had to jump on and be a part of. And it's just really incredible what you've been able to do. And, it was funny, the other day, my wife was looking at our shared calendar, and she's like, wait a minute, what are you doing at the University of Oregon next summer? Can I come? I was like, oh, sorry. This is a trip for me.
Yeah, well, I know a guy if she wants a discount, so you can just message me after the call. But no, thanks for that, Jason. I really, obviously you and I have known each other and known each other in the running world for a long time. And so it wasn't just the fact that you thought it was cool, but really wanted to sign on, knowing how picky and choosy you understandably are about your time there, and really wanting to be a part of it as this thing launches. I mean, I know a lot of folks are excited just to get to spend some time with you at Eugene, let alone have you write their training plans and be available from time to time like this. So I'm really excited about your participation. I very much genuinely appreciate the guidance you've helped put into. I mean, you and Kate have both been so great about not just being, wanting to be on board and be part of the team, but really helping to shape the experience, both Jason based on your coaching and Kate based on your running and running with an elite team, is something that I think your DNA is all over the program. And I think that folks will see that. And I like to say that, there's always that expression of, if you can't spot the sucker at the poker table, it's you. And that's true if you're playing cards, but I think in just about every other facet of life, I always try to encourage everyone I know to be the weakest, the dumbest, the slowest one at the table, because you're going to be surrounded by folks who are going to help you excel. And so I have found, as the sort of central connective tissue in building this, that it has been great to be one of the weakest coaches, the worst athletes, the least charismatic. I mean, just all of those things. That is lucky for me to be sort of sitting at a table with folks who are so much stronger at all of those pieces, because then I can use my strength and skill, which I hope is allowing them to flourish and allowing them to bring their knowledge, expertise, and energy to the program and being the conduit for that. So I would encourage folks to really look us up on our website and check it out. And I know there's all kinds of good discount codes and things floating around out there. I'll sort of leave that to the ether for folks to find on both of your social media accounts. But check us out, because if you're like me and you think it would be cool to be part of a community with some of the best dietitians, coaches, athletes in the world, there's a real power in being treated as an equal at that table without actually having the physiological or psychological or mental talent to back it up. So I love being able to kind of sit at that table and dine with the rest to try to make myself better. And so to be able to provide that experience as a mechanism for growth through running, and really empowering people through a running experience, I think is really cool. And I'm really excited about it. So I hope folks come and check it out and go through the whole experience. I hope that if folks can't commit to the whole experience, as we start to think about maybe offering one or two of those things that are really key and really useful, like the Oregon retreat as a standalone thing, that they'll join us for that and see what it's like as well. So just sort of follow along, because I think that everyone who listens to this podcast and is still listening to me drone on right now is doing so, Jason, because they admire you and trust your work, and they have so much deep respect for Kate and what she's accomplished and her approach that we're going to just try to bring those to everyone's experience. And that's the goal.
Yeah. Now, Jake, what's the website?
The website is Endeavorun.com. It's Endeavor with a UN at the end of it. There's not 2 R's. You know, we didn't want to, you never miss an opportunity to smush words together, I like to say, right? There's just, you know, it's a moral crime to leave 2 words that are just sitting there, not smushed together. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen that Colgate Palmolive commercial lately where the woman claims she's having dish issues. Dishes, it's right there. Just smush them together. It's right there. Okay. So it's Endeavorun. It's just 1 R. You put it together. Check out the site. It's really easy. There's only 4 pages to the site. I recommend clicking start here on the homepage to watch the 2-minute video. And then if you follow us on Instagram or if you subscribe to our newsletter, you get all sorts of great content. In fact, our recent newsletter, Jason, just finished, featured one of your videos about exercises that you can do to get better at building and maintaining speed. And also there's a free intermediate level half marathon training plan that's sort of built with the kind of combination of both nonlinear and linear periodization for folks with a nice guidance key and some strength work and some core work that's built into that as well that you can just get for free for going to the website and being willing to get our newsletter. So we want to be able to provide that at minimum for folks who can't go through the whole experience.
Awesome, Jake. Well, like I said, I'm excited about this. I'm excited about hanging out with you next year. Kate, you as well. So we can go to endeavorun.com and learn more about the program. And I'm also going to include links and a discount code to registration if you're interested on the StrengthRunning blog and in the description of this podcast when it goes out. So I'm not going to have everyone remember our muddled how to spell things here on the podcast. But Jake, Kate, thanks so much for making some time and talking about your training, Kate, and how you think about it, and Jake, Endeavorun, and how, you know, I don't think the running industry has seen something like this. And I think you're really filling a need for the really passionate runner who wants to improve, who wants to see their potential to get that pro experience and just to use it as a great learning experience that they can then use for the rest of their lives. You know, they'll have access to the resources, they'll have access to, you know, a lot of that from the program, and also just the knowledge that you will learn over time. So I think it's just wonderful, super excited to be a part of it. And I can't wait to geek out in the University of Oregon next year.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. There's going to be so much fun stuff, and I'm just excited to get out there and maybe, you know, not that I would advise doing anything illegal, but, you know, Hayward Field is technically closed. They're redoing it right now in preparation for Kate winning the U.S. title there in June. So we're going to be there a few weeks after that. And we'll at least pose for some pictures outside. And obviously, if somebody happens to sneak onto the field and run a 400, I mean, we can't stop them. You know, I don't advise it, but it's a possibility. You know, it's been done. Let's just put it that way.
This retreat is going to be so much fun.
I'm excited. It's going to be awesome. And yeah, we're going to do great stuff. Running trivia. We'll have strength demos. We've got Kate's PT, Jay DeSherry, who's really well-renowned, lives not too far from Kate and the Bowerman team, is coming there to do a biomechanics. We'll have all sorts of athlete Q&A seminars. It's going to be awesome.
Now, is this Jay DeSherry of Anatomy for Runners and Running Rewired fame?
In fact, not only is it that, but I've got a copy of Running Rewired right here. There's none other than an endorsement for an Olympic middle distance runner that says, Jay is, simply put, the best. His program prepared me for success in my training for the Rio Olympics, from somebody named Kate Grace, who you both may know. It's written right here on the back of the book. And in fact, because Jay is a sponsor, if folks are interested in getting that book, which is awesome, we have, I think it's 30% off for anybody who wants a copy of that book with a special code that Jay hooked us up with. So there's, you know, folks like Jay and Matt and others are going to be there. You know, go check out the team page on our website. It's going to be off the hook. I've already started building the running trivia for our pub night. That's going to be out there. We've got a recovery. The
important things.
The important things, right? We've got a recovery lounge set up where some of our partners and sponsors are going to be sending things like rapid reboot compression systems and other things for us to test out while we're there. So we've got some pretty cool stuff going on.
I am so excited. Jake, thank you. Kate, thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. This was so fun to talk about everything. Looking forward to more.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, I'll cut the audio right there. This was